Hi, I'm Jennifer LeBeau. I'm a realtor here on Philadelphia's Main Line, and welcome to the 8th installment in my Home Buying 101 video series. This one's called Hitting the Pavement. So you're starting to look for a house. I agree with everyone out there, the best place to start your search is online. No sense in driving around aimlessly until you've done your homework. So you've done research on commute times and maybe school districts, and you've started to look at some homes that look like they might be possibilities. One thing I like to tell people to do, another great tool that's available on the internet, even though it's not on the MLS, is I always recommend that people go to Google Street View. Now, not every property is available in Street View, but most are. So I like to tell people, if you found a house that looks good otherwise, Google it on the Google Maps and look at the Street View and take that camera that rotates around and try to get a sense of what the rest of the street or the neighborhood looks like. Because most of the time, the pictures are of the front of the house and then the interior, but you have no idea what's across the street or what the street really feels like. Is it very open? Is it heavily treed? That kind of thing. So that's definitely something that you can do from the comfort of your chair. But when you've done all of that and there are some properties you think might look good, you got to hit the pavement. There's no substitute for seeing a property in person, because there's things that you just can't know unless you are touring a property. For example, what we call the feel. Does this house feel like somewhere you could live, that could feel like home to you? What about the layout? Sometimes, even if you've studied all of the pictures that there are, you don't really have a sense of where certain spaces are or how the flow works. So you need to walk through a house to figure out if that flow and that layout will work for you. And then what about the areas that you didn't see pictures of? Now keep in mind, on the MLS, the realtor can only put up 25 pictures, so there's a limit to the number of images that can be shown. Additionally, smart realtors may omit pictures of areas that just don't look very good. And there are areas that, even if they're beautiful, are hard to photograph, like bathrooms or closets, or even areas in finished basements. So you're not going to really know what all of those nooks and crannies look like unless you go in person. Going to do a property visit also isn't just about the house. What about the site, the land? There's frequently only one or two pictures of the exterior. What's the backyard like? Sometimes it's hard to tell if it's sloped, maybe there's a really steep driveway, or if the property's heavily treed in the back. What if there's a high water table nearby or a creek and it's kind of swampy in the back? You're not going to know that from the pictures, so you have to go check it out. And then the rest of the neighborhood. Is there a water tower that you can see from your living room window, or high wire power lines? How about the rest of the street? Are the other houses on the street shabby at all? Is that not really where you want to live? Can you hear the highway, or is there a train that runs behind the house that's noisy? Those things you got to go and find out by visiting the property in person. So a couple of tips. When you go to look at some houses, unless you have a restricted schedule where, for example, you're flying in from somewhere and for whatever reason you simply have to find a house this weekend, which is a really pressure-filled situation, which I don't recommend, but sometimes can't be helped. If that's not the case, please try not to overdo the number of houses you see in a day. I find that most people, after about 6 or 7 houses, they start to get that glazed look, and they're kind of no longer able to evaluate when they walk in the door, and it just gets all jumbled. It's also hard to remember at the end of the day which house had which features, and you'll say, did that one with the really great master closet, was that the one that had that weird space on the landing? And you might not remember. So tip number 2 is designed to combat that a little bit. I recommend strongly that you take notes, you take pictures on your iPhone, and you take video, which I recommend you narrate, so that when you're looking at that weird funky space on the landing, you can say, here's this weird space, I don't really know what we do with this. Just so that when you are going back through your notes or thinking about the properties you saw, you'll have that visual reminder. The other thing is, if at all possible, and I know people's work schedules don't always accommodate this, try to go during the daylight. You really need to see what the house looks like, what the natural light's like. It's just easier by far to see the exterior and the yard if you go during the daylight. That said, if you are concerned about, for example, you're down the street from a school and you're wondering at 3 o'clock, what's the traffic like there? Or the way the house is sited on the property, you're wondering, I wonder at night if the headlights are going to come right into our bedroom window. If there are concerns related to time of day or things like that, if you've liked the house on your first visit, make an appointment to go see it, if at all possible, during those other times so that you can make an evaluation and not get surprised. This has happened to me a lot. I will meet a client at a property and we walk in the door and the client looks at me and says, "Are you sure this is the right house?" And then we check and indeed it is. And we laugh about the fact that, boy, it sure doesn't look like this online. It looks really different in person. That does happen quite a lot. And remember, realtors are supposed to get you into the house to see it. That's the listing agent's job. So the description, I'm sure you've read them, completely updated or family-sized bedrooms or those kinds of things, a lot of times you have to take them with a grain of salt. Well, they do the same thing with pictures. You'll see a lot of wide-angle lenses being used and some photoshopping even sometimes, such that the space in person really doesn't look like the pictures. It definitely happens. But I will tell you that more often than you might think, it happens in the reverse. And I have had several instances where a client has said, "Oh, this actually looks a lot better in person than I thought looking at the pictures online." So the point is, once you've done your internet research, and I absolutely do agree that's the best place to start, you're going to have to get out there and see some things in person and just be open-minded and pay attention. I hope this video has been helpful, and I invite you to look at the other videos in the Home Buying 101 series on my website. Thanks for listening.